Hello everyone. This may be a long shot, but I'm attempting to determine if anyone remembers a huge blackout in the middle of August in 2014. It was a significant occurrence at the time, but I've never encountered anyone who remembers it or is ready to discuss it. I am still unsure if the blackout affected merely my city or the entire country. If I'm being completely honest, I believe it was global. If you recall it, then everything will make sense. If you don't, you will likely consider me insane. Maybe I am. I'm hoping someone will tell me I'm not insane. When a significant event occurs that shatters our shared perception of normalcy, we process it by sharing our own accounts with others. We ask each other where we were on September 11, 2001, or bond over our common experience of fear and isolation in the early days of the COVID outbreak. Never before have I had the opportunity to do so in this situation. Therefore, I'm going to attempt to do it now, if only because I'm anxious about what may yet lie ahead and I have no one to discuss this anxiety with. The blackout occurred on Thursday evening, August 24, 2012. Back then, my ex and I lived close to her parents, and we frequented their home for supper and television viewing. We were sometimes too exhausted from the workplace to engage in much social interaction. The only time we spoke was when we laughed at a joke in a sitcom or debated a theory about a show's mysterious plot. This evening was proceeding similarly until the lights went out. We were watching Jeopardy when the power went out, so it must have occurred sometime between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. It was odd because there was no stormy weather and the weather was rather crystal clear. As our eyes adjusted, we were able to see the stars beyond the living room window more vividly than ever before. In addition, we could see some flashing lights in the distance. It was an odd green light that flashed near the horizon like distant lightning. When my ex-girlfriend inquired about the flashes, her father, Brad, stated that it was most likely transformers exploding. As far as we could tell, whatever was creating the lights was silent, although it is certainly possible that it occurred too far away for us to hear it. My ex's parents resided in a suburb on the west coast of the United States that was not quite near to our city, but close enough that there was usually light pollution. Now there was no light pollution, simply distant green flashing lights and dazzling stars in the night sky. We felt this indicated that the darkness was widespread. Both of my ex-parents' spouses grew raised in tiny towns, and they agreed that they had never seen a night sky with so many stars. It would not have been conceivable with a huge city full of lights less than 20 miles away, thus there must have been electricity out there as well. I recall Brad removing 3 flashlights from one of the kitchen drawers, and Lori, my ex-mother, girlfriend's lighting candles in the living room, kitchen, and downstairs bathroom. Brad went to the garage and returned with a radio powered by batteries. He activated it and fiddled with the controls in an attempt to fill the stillness. There was no audible sound. He tuned the radio to a local news channel and left the sound at a low level so that we could hear if someone began to broadcast. It was intriguing in a sense. You know that feeling of being in the dark, unaware of why the power went out and when things would return to normal? My ex and I were both scheduled to work the following day, and we were ecstatic with anticipation that we wouldn't have to go, like children watching snow fall on a school night and praying for a snow day. In addition, there was a sense of security in knowing that the power loss was not caused by a storm that threatened to blow a tree onto the house. We gathered on the floor of the living room and played Scrabble when Lori brought out some board games. After some time, the static on the radio cleared up and a gentle voice began speaking. My ex-girlfriend was nearest, so she increased the volume. I checked my phone, which was still charged, and noticed that it was just after 9:30 p.m. The voice on the radio was that of a lady. This is a message for the general public. There are currently significant power outages, and public services are restricted. Please remain indoors, and we will provide updates as they become available. The message played continuously, so we turned it down. It was a little unsettling, and we joked that this was a terrible method for keeping people calm. We discussed how none of us had ever heard a similar public service announcement during a blackout. The background message continued to play at a low volume until Brad got up and turned off the radio. It is unnecessary to hear it repeatedly. We will examine it before bed to determine if anything has changed, he remarked. Thus, we continued to play Scrabble. We concluded at 11:30 that we should probably retire to bed. My ex and I were unsure if we would have to work in the morning, so we decided it was better to be well rested. Lori offered us to spend the night in the guest room of her parents' home, where we occasionally stayed when house sitting. It did not appear like we were supposed to go out. We checked the radio once more, the message remained the same, before retiring to our own beds. Outside the bedroom window, I could still observe green sparkles on the horizon. I set an alarm at 7:15 on my phone. I definitely should have conserved battery power, but I didn't want to miss work if the power was restored. We were awakened in the middle of the night by a loud voice coming from outside. "Please stay inside. We will provide updates when we get additional information." It repeated and became more louder before becoming increasingly softer and further distant. I suppose it was one of those trucks with a loudspeaker or something, traveling through the neighborhood and broadcasting the message, but I didn't see anything outside. Only green is seen. My phone's clock indicated that it was 3:22 a.m. At 7:15, my alarm sounded. I stood up and switched the guest room's light switch, but nothing occurred. I looked out the window, but it was just beginning to get light, so I could not determine if any buildings outside the neighborhood had electricity yet. In the morning light, the absence of green flashes on the horizon seemed reassuring. I walked downstairs to turn on the radio as my ex went upstairs to use the restroom. The message was identical. There are currently significant power outages, and public services are restricted. Please remain indoors, and we will provide updates as they become available. This is a message for the general people. I returned upstairs and entered the guest room just as my ex emerged from the restroom. I stated, "No work today," and threw myself upon the bed. I turned off my phone. Quickly, she joined me and we both fell asleep once more. We had the blinds open. The daylight provided a sense of security and warmth. Someone hammering on the bedroom door awoke us later. "Honey? Are you conscious in there?" we heard, in Lori's voice. My ex-partner said, "Yes, Mom, we're inside." "All right, but can you tell me if the curtains are open in that room?" My ex and I exchanged glances. "Yes, Mother, the drapes are open." "Can you close them and assist your father and I by descending?" I stood up and unlocked the door. As I was still awakening, my brain was unable to digest information quickly enough. "What?" I asked. Lori walked past me into the room while holding a roll of duct tape. She drew the blackout curtains shut and began taping the curtain edges to the wall. This was a very puzzling scene to observe upon awakening 30 seconds later. "Please proceed downstairs to assist Brad. He'll explain it," she stated. We descended the steps. The living room included a pile of blankets, sheets, and clothing. In the kitchen, Brad was taping a heavy blanket to the window. When he spotted us, he commented, "Oh, how fortunate. You're awake. I need you to take these garments and place them beneath the entrance and garage doors." A radio was playing. A fresh message could be heard playing. "This is a message for the general public. There is no cause for concern. Please remain calm. Remain inside and close the windows and curtains. Try to restrict the amount of outdoor air and light that can enter your home. As many windows, skylights, and door gaps as possible should be obstructed. Fill your bathtub and as many containers as you can with water from the faucet. We will provide updates when we get additional information." As the message continued to play on the radio, we assisted Brad and Lori in blocking as many exterior entrances as possible. My ex-partner and Lori worked upstairs, while I assisted Brad downstairs. We filled both baths with water and refilled each glass in the cabinet with tap water before leaving them on the counter. Once more, we were in the dark with only flashlights and candles for light. I activated my phone to check for service, but there was none available. My phone said that it was a little after 11 a.m. We took inventory of the food in the home. We estimated that we had enough food to eat comfortably for perhaps 10 days, possibly 20 if we rationed well. Brad believed it was premature to begin rationing, but we agreed to do so in 3 days if the situation did not improve. So we estimated that we had enough food for approximately 2 weeks. We all found it much more difficult to maintain our composure than the night before. The tension within the home was evident. We didn't want to turn off the radio because the situation had become so dire, so the PSA continued to play in the background throughout the day. We did our best to play games or discuss work and behave as though everything was normal. A few times, we heard the booming voice outside, likely coming from a truck with loudspeakers, urging us to remain inside and cover the windows. However, aside from that morning's surprise, not much changed during the day. We stayed up until we went to bed. Since the power outage, it had been relatively quiet outside, with the exception of the loudspeakers. We were all awakened late Friday night, or early Saturday morning, I'm unsure, by an unnerving sound from outside. It sounded like it was both very far away and just outside the home at the same time. It was a sound somewhere between a loud hum and the constant monotony of a brass horn. It did not fade in and out, rather, it was constant, filling the area around us. We all emerged from our own bedrooms. Everyone was noticeably shaken, but no one dared to look outside to locate the source of the sound. Brad tried to reassure us that it was probably nothing to worry about, but he was clearly terrified as well. We decided to go downstairs and sleep together in the living room, when we discovered that the radio was no longer transmitting a signal. Brad replaced the batteries and reactivated the device, but nothing happened. The only indication that the outside world existed was an unwanted, monotonous horn in the distance. One by one, we fell asleep again. I guess I was the last person. I have severe anxiety, and the situation was becoming increasingly bizarre and difficult to control. In addition, I honestly do not see how anyone could sleep through Brad's snoring, but at least the snoring provided an alternative to the humming of the horn or the static on the radio. I eventually fell asleep, but it was a restless sleep, and I didn't get nearly enough of it. Saturday was the first day that I awoke. The wall clock indicated that it was just after 5 a.m. The sound of humming continued. This was my second consecutive morning without coffee, so I felt a headache but was not at all fatigued. I silently rummaged through the cabinets, hoping Brad and Lori would have canned cold brew coffee or something else with caffeine that could be made without electricity, but there was nothing. I discovered some Tylenol in the bathroom medication cabinet and took it before scanning the radio frequencies in an attempt to find another station that was airing. Nothing. A green flash appeared in the periphery of my vision. I observed that the tape on one of the living room curtains had become detached, so I went to reapply it to the wall. I had no idea why, but I felt compelled to peek outside through the opening, which I did. What harm could it do? Nothing close appeared to be unusual. The green lights persisted on the horizon in the distance. I reattached the tape to the wall and waited in silence until the others awoke, reading the Scrabble handbook. I have no idea what that Saturday was like for you guys, if you remember it at all, but for us, it was relatively uneventful. And that was actually rather pleasant. We prepared ourselves a breakfast tray of sliced fruit and unspoiled cheese that we found in the refrigerator. We played some games, Scrabble for a while, then Uno, and Lori let me to peruse the books in her room in search of something to read except the Scrabble handbook. The horn never ceased, and there was nothing new on the radio. I cannot recall hearing any loudspeakers during the day. I believe that glancing out the window that morning somewhat alleviated my anxiousness. Even though the green flashes were still strange, it was reassuring to see that the outside world appeared generally normal. Aside from the constant sound of the horn, this indicated that our situation had not changed significantly, therefore it felt less urgent and perilous. Even the horn's humming was becoming easier to ignore. I slept more soundly that night. When we awoke on Sunday and discovered that the electricity was still off, we were forced to consider rationing our supplies. We agreed to limit ourselves to one meal every day. I figured it would be best to go as long as possible without eating, so I skipped breakfast that morning. Brad replaced the batteries in the radio and double-checked that it was still tuned to the news channel, and we redoubled our efforts to remain calm and composed. We engaged in games. Lori attempted to instruct me in meditation. We argued over whether we would be rescued and whether we were in a circumstance that necessitated rescue. I believe we all had the impression that something was occurring that was more than just a power outage, but none of us knew what it was. Brad and Lori were persuaded to play Cards Against Humanity in the evening, The wall clock was the only way we could keep track of time. My ex-partner and I had given them the item for Christmas a few years earlier, but they never opened it. We discovered it in their hallway closet and pleaded with them to let us play it. Cards Against Humanity, we assured them, is one of the best ways to alleviate boredom. It had been a very long time since we had such a good time. We were roaring with laughter, especially after hearing Brad and Lori read out improper card combinations. We opened one bottle of wine, then another, and finally a third. We were most likely playing our fourth or fifth game when we heard a huge rumble outside and the entire house began to shake. I'm not sure whether you recall the earthquake, but if you do, you can appreciate the dread we were about to encounter. The ground underneath us appeared to be rolling. Items were dropping from the shelf. When the sheets and blankets began to fall from the windows, we all hurried to rehang them. That seems to be the most crucial aspect. I am aware that it is advised to shelter under a doorway or under a table during an earthquake, but we all had the instinct to shield the windows. Our only knowledge of the situation was that we were required to keep the windows covered. As the earthquake faded, we heard a distant siren blasting. Not like an ambulance. It resembled an air raid siren or another type of alert. I have never heard anything such. The sound of the horn once more replaced the rumbling of the earthquake. However, the horn was considerably louder, closer, and brassier than before, and it sounded less like a hum and more like a horn. No matter how loud the air raid sirens were, they were unable to drown out the horn. Once again, the static on the radio subsided, and we heard the voice. It was not the woman's voice this time. It spoke English, but I could not determine its gender. There was an unusual metallic echo to the speech, but it did not appear to be the result of radio interference or transmission issues. It was precisely as the voice sounded. This is an urgent communication. Please do not leave your homes. Do not go outside. Do not peek outdoors. Find a focal location in your home and never leave it. Cover your eyes and back away from all windows and entrances. It is crucial that you continue to listen to this broadcast. It occurred repeatedly. This is an urgent communication. As the horn sound grew louder, we all hurried towards the middle of the house, near the stairs. The earthquake had ended, but the house continued to tremble, possibly because to the screaming sirens and horn sounds that were now blaring all around us. Do not go outside. Do not peek outdoors. This voice was quite frightening. It is crucial that you continue to listen to this transmission. I then experienced a panic attack. My therapist says I catastrophize and anticipate the worst-case scenarios. I was stunned by the realism of all the instructions: fill the bathtubs with water, cover the windows, stuff any gaps with clothing, move to the middle of the house, and hide our eyes. It was plain to me at that moment what was about to occur. We were going to perish. This is the appearance of a full-scale nuclear attack. All of it was excessive. Too much background noise. Too much strain. Too many things occurring simultaneously. I had to leave the area. I struggled to breathe. I was going to die on the floor in the middle of the suburbs, not having seen the outside world for 3 days. I was barely sensible in my thinking. I concluded, screw it, and dashed for the door. I was unable to stay there. My ex-girlfriend screamed in terror and attempted to pursue me, but Brad held her back. No. Stay in your home. If we go outside, we perish. When I reached the door, Brad yelled, "Don't peek outside." I looked back and saw all three of them conceal their eyes and turn their heads away from me. I opened the door by turning the knob, then threw myself outside. As I closed the door, their screams vanished from behind me. If you're better at following directions than I am, here is likely where my experience differs from yours, if you have any memory of this at all. Outside, both the horn and the siren were significantly louder and more severe than you recall them being. However, it was still more comforting than it was inside the house, and the crisp, chilly air was a relief. The sky was crystal clear, and the stars shone brightly. Due to the city's typical light pollution, I had never before seen so many of them. The green flashes appeared brighter and closer than previously, but they did not interfere with the starlight in any way. Even in the midst of a panic episode, I was awestruck by the breathtaking scene. I scoured the skies for signs of a nuclear apocalypse, but what I discovered will stay with me till the day I die. The strangest, largest, and darkest triangle-shaped object I'd ever seen was gently gliding across the night sky in the heavens above us. If not for the fact that it obscured the stars as it moved, I might not have even noticed its presence. It was the largest object I had ever seen, excluding the Earth itself. Greater than any peak I've ever seen and more expansive than any city I've ever encountered. It appeared to be high up in the upper atmosphere, and it still encompassed almost 30% of the night sky, so I know it was quite large. Aside from the fact that it was flying, nothing about it indicated that it should have been able to hang in the air as it did. There was no visible propulsion or rotors. As I watched the object slowly carve a route across the sea of stars, the horn sound reverted to a quiet hum before fading away. The sirens also decreased until there was nothing but tranquility, and I realized that this vast ship was completely silent. It slowly traversed the night sky from east to west towards the Pacific Ocean. It ultimately reached the western horizon and began to gently disappear below the hills as it reached that point. As it moved, the stars concealed behind its infinite frame became visible. Mile after mile, it vanished behind the Earth, until I saw the last of it evaporate in a burst of brilliant green light on the horizon. In the depths of darkness, the globe suddenly lit up once more. Every house and streetlight around me shone brightly, and most of the stars appeared to vanish as a result of the city's light pollution. I heard a neighbor open a window, and laughter could be heard emanating from their home. Music could be heard in the distance. I peered at the western horizon for what seemed like days, questioning whether or not I had seen what I believed I had seen. It appeared impossible, but the memory is permanently etched in my mind. I eventually took a deep breath and began walking back inside. I made my way into the living room, where I observed Lori, Brad, and my ex-boyfriend all seated on the sofas and watching a television program. I sat next to them. Nobody spoke a word. My ex and I sat in quiet during the entire car journey home that night, and we went to bed without speaking to one another. The following day at work, everything appeared eerily normal, and nobody was eager to discuss the happenings of the previous 3 days. I sat at my desk, performed some basic work, and watched the clock approach 5 p.m. Nobody in the office brought it up or even hinted at anything out of the ordinary, and I was wanting to discuss what we all had experienced. I finally struck up a discussion with a coworker at the day's conclusion. She inquired about my weekend, and I responded with a chuckle that it was certainly memorable. Then I asked her how she was coping with all that had transpired, and she was truly puzzled in a way that was inconceivable for someone who had experienced even a small portion of what I had. Only then did I understand that no one else remembered what had transpired. I have not yet met anyone who recalls the 2014 blackout, distant trumpet, or earthquake, let alone the strange object blocking out the sky. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, I urge you to please let me know. This event has altered my entire existence and wrecked my understanding of the cosmos, and I have no one with whom to discuss it. Even if you didn't see the triangle-shaped ship that stretched for miles across the blackest night sky imaginable, it would be comforting to know that somebody remembers the power outage. It is incredibly alienating to feel as though this has been erased from our collective memory and to wonder if my memory is the sole remaining record of what transpired during those 3 days. I've kept my lips shut for a very long time out of dread of what my friends and family will think of me if I discuss what happened over the weekend. However, it is crucial that I determine if anyone else remembers any of this. I have been observing the night sky for 7 years, and for the majority of that period, I have not observed anything out of the norm. Until roughly 6 months ago, when I observed a black triangle obscuring the sky. It was considerably smaller than what I observed in 2014, measuring only a few hundred feet wide, but its shape was undeniably same. I've been noticing them more frequently as of late. Now, whenever I look up into the sky at night, generally long after everyone else has gone to bed, I think I can see 1 or 2 smaller pitch-black triangles gliding slowly and silently across the sky. Tonight, if you go outdoors and look up, you could find one. You will be able to discern the contour of a perfect triangle if you look for stars that appear and disappear. Last night, while searching for them, I believe I began to observe green lights on the horizon. They are considerably darker than they were back then, but they are still visible, I believe. I haven't gotten much sleep lately, and they appeared to become brighter as the night progressed. Since I stayed up all night gazing at the night sky, it's possible that my eyes were simply accustomed to the darkness better. I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of a constant horn in the distance, but nobody has mentioned it today. Perhaps everyone was asleep. Or maybe I'm losing it. Since 2012, I cannot say that my mental health has been excellent, so who knows? But I don't believe I'm losing my mind. I can't help but wonder if similar events occurred in the weeks, months, or years preceding August 24, 2012, and no one noticed. However, I am now aware of it and attempting to prepare for the worst. Even if you have no memories of that weekend, you should certainly prepare yourself nonetheless. I have no idea what these objects in the sky are or what the gigantic triangular object was on that particular day. But I'm certain it was present. And I do not wish to alarm anyone, but whatever it is, I believe it will return. Please make an effort to remember at this time when it occurs.